Hello, everybody. Welcome to JH Leadership and Strategy Monetizing Innovation, the show where we explore how visionary leaders turn ideas into impact and innovation into revenue. I'm your host, John Holcomb, and today we're diving deep into the real world challenges and breakthroughs behind commercializing new technologies. Our guest, Ram Belusu, is a trailblazer in digital transformation and business growth. With a proven track record of scaling teams and pioneering change in complex sectors, join us as we unpack actionable strategies, leadership mindsets, and the inside story of building sustainable market winning innovation. And Ram, thank you so much for your time today. I truly appreciate you joining us. I was wondering if you could just share a little bit more about sort of your background and some of your journey to date.
Sure. So thank you for having me on. My pleasure to be here. By education, I'm a chemical engineer. I've spent the last 36 years exclusively in the healthcare space. I'm only in the US, to some extent in Europe, and to some extent in Asia Pac. And my mission has always been to bring in the best technology to make patient care better. So in healthcare, there are four different buckets. There are the payers, the insurance companies, the providers, the clinics, nurses, physicians, and others. Then there is the producers, the biotech companies, medical device companies that create the product. And finally, there's the CROs, the contract research organizations that drive research. So I've had the privilege of working in all four of those categories. And again, it's been absolute privilege to be able to do some work with technology and then actually see it benefiting patients. So at the end of the day, you go back and say, wow, I did something useful. So I'd say it's a privilege being in this industry.
No, absolutely. And I love the way you broke it down into those four major sectors, right? Especially with the work. And in each of those spaces, you've been able to drive innovation and leadership. Could you share some of the bigger challenges that you've had, especially driving some of the new innovation to market?
Sure, absolutely. So historically in the healthcare space, healthcare industry has always been behind in technology. Some say it's because of the higher regulatory burden, but I say it's primarily because the best and brightest computer science people generally don't gravitate towards healthcare. They tend to go to tech companies. At the end of the day, what we have is a healthcare system in the US that is not optimized for patients yet. And so if you look at what makes healthcare successful, there are what I call the three A's of healthcare: the availability of good healthcare, the accessibility to that healthcare, and the affordability of that healthcare, the three A's. Now, we have arguably in the US some of the best innovations when it comes to technology, whether it's continuous glucose monitors that can read diabetes patients' sugar level, whether it's genetic therapies to help with rare diseases, whether it's maybe creating pioneering medications for cardiac support, things of that nature, or vaccines and so on. That is available, but it's not necessarily accessible to everybody, whether because they are in a location in the country where maybe they don't have access to the best hospitals and so on. And in some cases, it's not affordable because of various insurance restrictions. So, one of the biggest challenges has been to certainly look at technology that works in other industries, but to modify it to fit into the healthcare space with all the regulations, with the various cost aspects of it, and so on. And also to be able to convince existing highly successful companies and hospital systems who may feel they're okay because their margins are being met and say, here's a better way of doing something. And the barrier to convince is higher. Adding to the complexity is that when technologies from commercial and retail and transportation industries have been forcibly brought without enough forethought into healthcare, they failed. And the first few failures all of a sudden start putting up a resistance. And the larger companies, the Glaxos of the world, will say, we don't want to be the people that cut ourselves from this cutting edge. Let someone else try it first. So these are some of the challenges that come in. Another challenge I found was very relevant to the recent times with AI. Right? I've been working with AI and ML for about 30 years, but generative AI is brand new. We're about barely 4 years old. This thing is an amazing technology. And if I look at the power of the GenAI technology in terms of how fast it can learn, that's very good. At the same time, when you look at its applicability directly to healthcare, is extremely low. So, for instance, with a big pharma company I was with until last year, one of the world's biggest, top five, we tried to bring in generative AI through Microsoft Copilot because it so happened this was a Microsoft company, like most companies are. You've got Microsoft 365 and so on. So Copilot came bundled in. So when we brought Copilot in to say, okay, can you digest these 73,000 operating procedures across 135 countries and identify for us what the differences are between them and tell me where we could improve. The expectation was based mostly on what tech companies say this thing can solve your problem for you. You can lay off half your staff with this technology. The expectation is very high that this tool could automatically digest the content of these procedures. You'd be surprised the understanding and comprehension rate was less than 17%. So this tool, Microsoft Copilot, could not make head or tail of the content of the procedures because it was not trained in an LLM that understood pharmaceutical or healthcare terms. Then people started to blame the tool itself, saying this is not a good tool. And I took pains to point out the tool is very smart. No one sat it down and taught it how to understand healthcare terminology. So I say that the best way I've found to leverage generative AI is to treat it like a very smart employee, but with zero experience, who's on the first day of his or her job. Now, you interact with them by being very explicit about the directions, and then they can learn pretty fast. So then I started doing what was called the prompt engineering with Copilot. And I say, go to this Russian to English dictionary, then go to the Russian region standard operating procedures, match it to the 21 CFR Code of Federal Regulations and what it requires, and then come back and provide a risk analysis of the procedure. I did that for about 6 months. Next thing you know, it's got an 83% comprehension rate. Now we are truly able to identify differences in procedures across 135 countries. We're able to do that with 53% less staff. So I think that's an example where the tools are there, they're great, but they were mostly designed, the AI tools are designed in Silicon Valley, in my neck of the woods, by a bunch of super smart techies who have not worked in healthcare. So even recently, you saw Satya Nadella from Microsoft coming out and saying, we're going to create verticals for each industry in the GenAI space. Hasn't happened yet, but the directly applicable vertical tools are what are required in healthcare. We don't have them yet. And the other aspect of it is payers, insurance companies like United Healthcare were the first to adopt generative AI. Their stated goal was we want to be able to process claims faster because our patients are complaining they can't get claims processed fast enough. Unfortunately, they went at it a little too fast, with speed being the only focus, and the end result was an extremely high claim denial rate. Then they had to bring back people and do the whole people check and things like that in the claims, and it defeated the purpose. That was one extreme example where we saw this horrible situation where the United Healthcare executive paid for it with his life and so on. So not only do the tools need to be tailored for healthcare, we've got to be careful about how we introduce it. And most importantly, we have to avoid the tech industry hype and put a reality dose on it and say, here's what you can actually get out of these tools.
I think you bring up such a wonderful point there too, right? Because healthcare is not one size fits all, right? You just highlighted a couple of the different segments, and when we look at aspects of it, if the model's not trained for the task at hand, right? So whether it is actually from a diagnosis standpoint or from a payee record, these are some of the things that we have to help the industry do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the things I've been working on recently is this conversational AI. As you may know, we just don't have enough clinicians, caregivers, doctors, surgeons, and nurses in this country. We just don't have enough. So even where a nurse has to call a patient as a follow-up check to see if they're following post-op procedures, we just don't have enough people who are missing the post-op checks. So I said, why don't we bring in conversational AI tool that can call on behalf of the hospital to the patient and have a conversation and say how are things going, check their symptoms, and come back and report them in for a new scheduled appointment. So when we looked at that, certainly if it works, it'll work very well. But I was so surprised when I reached out to some of the leaders in Google in AI and said, hey, do you have a conversational AI tool I can use for my company? They said, sure. I said, can I use it for patient interaction? They said, no, not yet. It's not ready for that. I have so much respect for Google, right? They tell you what it's like. So what I did notice was that there were many situations where the conversational AI tool in pilots called patients. There was one example when the tool called a patient and tried to check on, hey, when can you come in for your cardiac checkup next Tuesday, such and such. And the patient said, the left side of my shoulder is hurting, the left side of my neck is hurting. And the agent said back to the patient, are you sure you can come in next Tuesday? And he said, I'm starting to sweat profusely and feel fatigue. And the agent said, looks like you're not ready to make an appointment, and hung up. Person ended up having a massive heart attack. So what I've been doing is I've been putting the failure modes effects analysis or FMEA process it's an industry first to apply it to generative AI. And I'm actually walking through the conversational agent steps and say, where could this process fail? And that's revealing some failure points. Now, zero risk is not a business reality. I would never advocate for that. But the most dangerous risk is the one that you didn't anticipate. So, by applying traditional risk management tools to generative AI processes, it's really helping identify where do we need the human in the loop, where do we need to bolster these tools. I'm probably one out of 100,000 people who are actually trying this out. I've not heard of any of my colleagues running FMEAs on AI tools, but I'm finding the results are good. If you're, I think you think about risk, right? If you go to Amazon and try to shop for a shirt and the algorithm does not give you the best shirt possible, okay, you got a more expensive item. In the case of healthcare, you could kill a patient with your mistake.
Yeah, exactly.
So that level of risk is what, when I actually explain to some of the tech companies, they get terrified about it, saying, wow, we didn't realize that this was a level of risk. But again, it's a wide open field. I would even say Gen AI is version 0 or beta. It's like really embryonic right now. But in healthcare, we don't have a choice, because what do we do when the costs go up? We say, oh, let's outsource the manufacturing to China or India or Philippines or wherever it may be, and then we get poor quality product. Now what do we do with it? So the correct way now we're doing this in manufacturing as well as care delivery is leveraging generative AI to streamline the costs for our products and services, but do it here onshore with all the controls in place. I think that's the way the future is going to be, and I'm privileged that I'm at the first step of that right now.
No, I think that's so exciting. And especially when I look at your background and expertise, right? One of the things that is truly impressive is you are coming in with knowledge of the constraints of the healthcare system, but then you're able to apply how does the technology work within the confines of that system, right? And I think the FEMA analysis is huge because that's such a I would say standard methodology used in both pharma, healthcare. And so could you speak a little bit more too in terms of how you leverage some of your expertise into some of these applications?
Yeah, so sometimes looking at older ways of doing things and applying it under the AI world makes it easy. So, for instance, there is a very old technology called Pi. This Pi software is what's called a data historian. So this tool can be attached to any data collection mechanism, whether in the manufacturing space or in the surgical space or hospital space, any system where data is being thrown off by sensors or being entered by people and so on. This Pi system can observe that 24/7 and quietly collects it. It's designed to collect massive amounts of data reliably, never goes down, pretty straightforward. And then you can present it up to you in any format you want, like SQL and so on. And so, uh, in many of the healthcare companies, especially on gene therapies, individual batches are extremely expensive. So, if you lose a gene therapy batch, say for pediatric leukemia, not only will the batch cost you 20, 30 million, but you got 100 young children who are waiting for that who could lose their life because you messed up your batch. And so what I started to do is apply this very old technology, Pi, directly to the gene therapy manufacturing space, how you extract blood from patients and centrifuge the plasma and create injection doses, all these autologous gene therapies. Only thing I did differently was I brought in Gen AI tools to, with a latency of about a couple of milliseconds, start observing the data historian data being thrown off by Pi. And what we were able to do with it was to say, your batch looks okay now, but it's still in spec, but it's starting to drift up or down. And we started putting in statistical control limits, upper and lower control limits. And so what this Pi tool started to do with GenAI was to squawk at us and say, in the next 3 batches or 3 hours, you're going to be out of spec. So maybe make some controls now, give it more oxygen or increase pH or whatever it may be. So that's an example where we took a very new technology like GenAI that could work in real time and an old technology like Pi, which has been around for 30, 40 years, applied to gene therapy process, we're actually able to reduce batch wastage by 87%, which translates to about 375 patients' lives saved every year. So when I saw the impact of it and we saw how easy it truly was, I was like, wow, this is amazing. So it's sort of taking the old problems with old solutions and layering Gen AI on top of that. It starts to truly give you insights. Whereas in the old days with traditional AI would do exactly the same thing Gen AI do, except it would do it on historical data. And by the time it gives you the output, your damage is already done. I think so. Gen AI to me is like a eye in the sky that can look at your process and predict what's to come. I think to me that was I was actually not able to believe how effective it was. So I had a couple of my colleagues check it. And they said, okay, this is amazing. And it didn't cost us much. All we had to do is pay $30 a month per Copilot Pro licenses. All we had to do is attach it, give it access to the high databases. Not even in production. We gave it access in the backup system, which was getting refreshed every few minutes. So like, oh, this is a low cost, high impact, powerful use case.
Well, I think that's such a great example too, because I find with so many great innovators, right? It's being able to apply that knowledge from what may not seem a related space and be able to apply it to that same space, right? And you find that there's often really some good logic that has been developed, and how do we bring it together? So I really respect that example. I think that that's a great example of innovation.
Thank you. And, one of the things I find is it's a lot of cross industry pollination that's happening. So, for instance, one of the challenges I was faced with was in 24/7 operations for hospital patient care, for instance. We needed nurses and physicians to monitor the patients all the time. We said, okay, we don't have enough of these people to monitor them. What do we do, etc. So I started designing a camera system that I called NetRay that could observe what the patient is going through with ambient listening features, what's he saying, what are they doing, connect it to the various feeds from their glucose monitor, from their blood pressure readings and temperature readings, those kinds of things, and be able to squawk an alert to the nurse or physician, say, hey, this person's vitals are off or on, or capture it that it's going very smoothly. So on a pilot basis, it worked very well, and hospitals were quite happy with it, as long as it's in a closed environment, so the information doesn't leave the hospital boundary, etc. When I spoke about this at a conference about 18 months ago, imagine my surprise when people from the FAA and the TSA reached out to me, and I said, "What can I do for you guys?" And they said, "Well, can you build that camera for us for airports?" I said, "What are you talking about?" So we just don't have enough people to monitor the bad actors sneaking into our airports causing trouble. We can use your technology to monitor people's vitals, faces, match their facial recognition to their passport, and all these other things. In that particular case, I told them how I would do it. I said, I just don't have the bandwidth to take on. The federal government is what, $1 or $2 billion project. I said, I can't take this on right now. I have some friends who can help you. But what really amazed me was I said, wow, the technology you develop in one field can be used in other areas if the underlying aspects are similar and can be leveraged. So if I had the time, I would run that project for the federal government, but perhaps next year.
No, I think that's so true. And I think it's interesting what you highlighted a little bit earlier in the conversation too. Is uh, I don't think you use these exact words, but it kind of came to mind to me. Some of these healthcare deserts, right, where folks are not close to the hospital or the expert. Some of this technology that you're working on, it really is powerful, right, from multiple aspects of the healthcare system. Could you comment a little bit on some of that work? And do you see the need for things like digital twins to potentially help be able to fully leverage the capabilities?
So digital twin, we can talk about when it comes to the manufacturing space in a few minutes. But if it's okay with you, I want to highlight one monitoring technology that may.
Oh,
So I had the privilege a few years ago to work for a company called Abbott Laboratories, and I was part of the team that helped them launch and build the continuous glucose monitor called Freestyle Libre that you might have seen advertised. Basically, it's for the benefit of our viewers, it's a round disc that sits on your shoulder and can measure your blood glucose, so you don't have to prick your fingers every few hours and so on. So the first stage of it was, well, how do you manufacture it efficiently? Because we thought we could sell maybe 10 million sensors per year. Then we found out the market demand was 200 million sensors per year. So we had to scale up and all those things. I came back and said, okay, now that you have people who are using this to measure their glucose levels who are diabetics, what are they doing with all the data that is throwing off? And so most people look at a single point. Okay, I ate a donut, my sugar level went up. Okay, I shouldn't eat it, things like that. Now that GenAI is in place, we started leveraging GenAI to actually read through the historical data for that person for the glucose and then match it up to a dietary recommendation. Here's your diet plan you want, and so on. So GenAI was actually reading real world, real life signals of a patient and then helping them avoid mistakes with the diet and exercise in real time. And next thing you know, we started to see athletes and young people who are interested in sports trying to use that in non prescription manner as well. So again, what Gen AI is able to do is look at massive amounts of data, give you a quick, reliable interpretation of it, and then you do what you want to do with the insights. Sometimes, if you look at later stages, where it's also starting to do some sort of recommended diets and things, connecting it to the various diet apps and so on. So that's starting to become more reality. In other words, you can see your future. So if I eat a donut, this is what's going to happen to me. Okay, exactly how much is the sugar going to go up? Like in the old days, people would say, if you eat an egg, your cholesterol will go up. Well, now we know that's not the case. Eggs have nothing to do with cholesterol. Well, how do you know that? Let's start using these variables. When it comes to digital twin space, ironically, generative AI can dispense with the need for a digital twin, meaning that in the old days, a digital twin was a physical entity and with some servers and things like that. With Gen AI can actually create a predictive algorithm that shows you what your current state digital system looks like 2 minutes in the future, 2 hours in the future, without actually creating a whole infrastructure.
Mhm.
So when I came up with this model for Industry 5.0, which is including predictive analytics from Gen AI, I'm finding that you no longer need the comprehensive digital twin system you used to set up in the past. Your Gen AI tool can virtually pop it up for you on screen as a digital twin on demand at any given time. I thought, well, that was, and it was the particular tool that helped me with this was Claude's Anthropic, the Claude product from Anthropic, that was able to not only show me the digital twin, but also show me how to correct the ladder logic code to make your live process more effective. That so I was able to save about $2.5 million instead of setting up a digital twin. I paid $60 a month for the license for Claude from Anthropic, and much to the chagrin of my engineering consultants who wanted to charge us a lot of money to build a digital.
No, that's a great example. I love that. It's so powerful. And I think to your point with the work that is possible with Gen AI, and then also taking the data from even the advancements in genetic testing and things like that, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. I think everything from finding more patients for clinical trials. So I think Foundation Medicine, a smaller company, has partnered with OpenAI that's able to scour the publicly available information and to locate patients. Now, again, in the US, you can say in the bigger cities, people have access to the various clinical trials, things like that. If you go to Asia Pac and Malaysia, India, smaller villages, and so on, there could be people there who don't even know that, hey, there's a clinical trial happening in Massachusetts that could save my life, and so the patient finding feature is one that's really helped a lot. Now, we're able to find 10% more patients than before last year. This year, we're able to find 25% more patients and so on. And the effort is lesser. The key is if you make the assumption that across the world, even in the smallest village in India, people still have iPhones and connectivity. And I was surprised when I saw what kind of bandwidth they were able to run. So I said, okay, if you have a device with you that can connect to the cloud, like an iPhone, Android, then you're already connected to the AI ecosystem, which means our bots can go search for them as well. So patient finding is one aspect. And the other aspect is in terms of affordability. So we talked about availability, accessibility, affordability. The affordability piece is really where it gets very helpful. Instead of having to drive in to meet with a physician, make an appointment, all those other things, you can do virtual appointments. Now, we already saw that in COVID. It's a pity that Gen AI wasn't there during COVID time. That made life a lot easier. So I think you got a situation where you can do virtual appointments, on-demand appointments, not only for day-to-day routine inspections, but one area where Gen AI has helped a lot is during the pandemic, a lot of young teenage kids, including my daughter's friends and others, young athletic kids in middle school, high school, used to running track, playing volleyball. Suddenly we told them, no, you got to stay inside the house 24/7. You can't go outside, all these things. Whatever you may think of the shutdown part of it, we did what we did.
Right.
But you had a horrible effect on a lot of young people. You can't tie young people into into a room and say, stay there. People started having a lot of behavioral issues. Some children went towards the suicidal ideation and people needed therapy and all kinds of things. The need for therapy exploded, and most families and parents couldn't understand what's happened to my kid. This person is a vibrant individual. Suddenly, he or she is displaying these tendencies. So we started to see a slow emergence and now a full scale emergence of behavior therapy apps. Now, if you put an iPhone app that can talk to you and say, hey, are you in crisis? If so, such and such, and then potentially route you to the right emergency services, that's one thing. But there's also a lot of, I would say, stigma associated or used to be with reporting mental health concerns. That's an area where I think today most people would say, okay, I need help Most companies now have this program called It's Okay Not to Be Okay. And people would say, hey, if you broke your hand, people give you a set of balloons and a card saying get well soon. But if you're depressed, nobody knows or cares, right? Whereas I think that's the behavioral health and mental health is one area where GenAI is exploding in its usability. The risk, of course, is that the GenAI bots are not really licensed physicians. They can make diagnoses for you. They can provide rapid intervention. And at best, they can connect you to your parents if you're in a remote location. And they can also give you an avatar that looks very personal. I was working on a tool to make it a 3D avatar that pops out of your projector on your phone. So it looks like you're interacting with the actual entity. So that's an area where we can do much more. Looking, obviously, the American Medical Association has some concerns about people going to these bots. But my challenge to them, and I've spoken with some of those folks, is either you start giving us more doctors or we'll start using other technology because you can't tell people who are in a crisis, come back next month for an appointment. I'm like, that's not reasonable. So we have the tech, let's use the tech. And the response I got was, what if a small percentage of patients get negatively impacted by this app? I said, okay, we got to manage the risk here. Instead of having 100 out of 100 kids not able to access therapy, if 90%, 90 of them can access therapy and 10% are at risk, all I've done is decrease the risk from 100 down to 10. It's still a contentious discussion with the American Medical Association. My challenge to them is how we solve the problem is on you, but I don't ever want to hear about some kid who lost her life because she could not access mental health services on time. And I say, if you want to know how to do it, here's a behavioral health app I can help you with. So it's a bit of a gauntlet that I threw down to the American Medical Association, see what they come back with.
No, but I think you're so accurate too, right? Because like you said, especially post COVID and even now, right? The medical healthcare system's still catching up, and to be able to have access to some even diagnostic tool, just to be able to help get folks seen faster or at least diagnosed faster is huge. So yeah, I agree. It is about managing risk, and if you can help bring down the total risk, that's powerful.
One area that I've been pitching much controversial feedback is something called benevolent monitoring. And so I even wrote on LinkedIn about that. And what it is if if we were able to observe people in real time doing whatever they're doing, whether they're driving, whether they're flying, or just going about their normal life, you could prevent 93% of all accidents. Because if you look at an accident or a fatality, say on the highway, that didn't happen out of nowhere. There were 5, 6, 15 different indicators that led to that point. If you had been keeping an eye on those and alerting the driver and alerting the people around you, then you could potentially have avoided it. If you have so many crimes that were committed when people lost their lives to horrible crimes, if you were monitoring things, you could actually reconstruct what happened and crime rates would fall. Like that Tom Cruise movie, Minority Report. Right? I think there was one example many years ago in Colorado where a lady and her daughter were driving along the highway, minding their own business, coming home from dinner or something in the afternoon. And all of a sudden, a massive rock broke through their windshield and smashed into the teenage daughter's face. She survived, thankfully, as did the mother, but she was basically a vegetable for the rest of her life. It was horrible.
Mm.
Then the police came in and found out that there were a couple of teenage kids who apparently had nothing better to do than standing on a bridge overpass with a small pile of rocks, and they kept throwing rocks down to many cars. This one hit. So I said, okay, now their lives are ruined too. They're in prison. My point was, these kids were doing this for what, 3, 4 hours? Why was there absolutely no monitoring? Could the monitoring have stopped it? And these are not bad kids. They were just, I suppose, kids who thought they were quote unquote having fun, resulting in a horrible outcome. But my question there was, if you had benevolent monitoring of what's happening around high risk areas or in airports, for instance, when the whole 9/11 thing happened and the two bad people came on, got onto the planes and blew things up, the gate agent to this day says in interviews that there was something off about these two gentlemen. They had this rage look in their face. They had a one-way business class ticket. They had no luggage. They wouldn't speak any English. They looked at me like they hated my guts. And I wanted to ask them, is everything okay? But I felt I'd be questioned, why are you asking these two people? And had we had an X-ray camera looking at them, they would have known in no time at all that their visa had expired, that their passports weren't necessarily matching their pictures, and the very fact they were on a one-way ticket to a place where they had no connection, no relatives there in the city, that would have thrown up 20 red flags, would have stopped them. So it really, I think, where GenAI can help us is to provide monitoring of what's going on. And when I presented this in a blog a while back with Databricks and those guys, they were like, well, wouldn't that invade my privacy? So my message there was, what, you don't have privacy now? You go through a neighborhood, there are 20 cameras from everybody's house looking at what your eye watch knows when you sleep, what your heart rate is, how much you walk. Your calorie counter knows how much you ate. You go to the airport, you're getting, we're already giving up our privacy. Your Easy Pass knows where you drove, how fast you drove. Your car knows how fast you drove. So I think the problem is we have all this data, just like the data historic example that I quoted before, but we're not using that adequately. So with no additional invasion of privacy, if we take the feeds that we're getting today, create a nice cloud-based environment for it, and have a benevolent monitoring tool look into that, it's going to help us. Now, if you, what is that old Benjamin Franklin statement? Those who sacrifice what for
Security.
purity deserve neither, etc. But Ben Franklin was a great guy. He lived several hundred years ago. But today, would you be willing to give up some of your privacy to multiply your safety and security for yourself and your family by tenfold or 20-fold? And to me, the answer always was, I don't care. If somebody wants to watch me every single day, I got no problem. I'm not doing anything wrong. They might get bored to death looking at how boring my life is, but they shouldn't be. So this is where GenAI can really help us in security, in securing our lives when we go outside, in being able to recreate bad events that actually happen, in being able to, let's say a small child runs off into the woods near your house. If you're watching him, you'd know where he was and catch him. That, as much as safety experts like the presentation when I made that a few months ago, a lot of the privacy folks were up in arms about it. I think we'll come around.
No, I completely agree with you, and I think it's such a fascinating concept too, right? Because this is where AI doesn't replace human judgment; it becomes a greater tool, so that we can, if AI is detecting the pattern, we can at least review the pattern, right? And I think that's where some of the privacy clash, right, with the security clash comes in. But it's not to replace good human judgment. We need these AI tools to help us, not to be us, right?
So what you mentioned there is very important, right? Replacing humans. So, for instance, if I look at the last 4 AI roadmaps I've written for major organizations, the first time I wrote that, one of the world's biggest pharma companies, the CEO says to me, he said, I'm going to go on Wall Street and tell them Gen AI will help us cure cancer in 3 years. I'm like, would you please stop doing that? It's not going to do any such thing. I said, but that's ambitious and bold. I said, yeah, but that's not going to happen. So he said, okay, how would you write your roadmap? So my roadmap for Gen AI implementation for any organization is 5 point. Number 1 is automate manual repetitive tasks with AI. Number 2 is to reduce errors. Number 3 is reduce cost per unit operation. And number 4 is to increase efficiency, decrease labor, maybe reduce headcount. Take the savings from that, put it into delivering faster pace of innovation of services and products, and scale your business so you can serve more patients or customers, whatever industry you may be in. And that has been extremely effective. And the last CEO I did that for said to me that, you're the first person who's talking in a practical sense about AI, because as you've gone halfway through implementation, half more to come, I'm seeing my business is scaling faster. I'm seeing, yes, we have reduced some headcount, but we've also served more patients and we have reduced our patient-related errors. So it's a win-win. He said, what would you do differently? The one thing I explained to him was, before we start any of these kinds of roadmap projects for AI, it's very important to build an AI culture in the company. Well, what does that mean? That means we want people to get excited about AI and understand that they need to stop worrying about whether they lose their job because of AI, and they might. So now in my new roadmaps, I have 2 foundational goals on top of the 5. One is to make sure our organization is AI ready. And the other one is to ensure our data architecture is ready for AI. So when people come to me and say, am I going to lose my job because of this new quality control copilot tool that you put in place? What I explain to them is, I can't predict whether you as an individual will or will not lose your job for AI, because AI will automate repetitive tasks. So if you're involved in manual repetitive tasks 60, 70% of the day, then that portion of your work will no longer be required. They said, what should I do? I said, well, you have 2 choices. You can fight it, you can get in its way, it'll run you over, and we'll still implement the project. You'll lose your job and you'll be this disgruntled person. Or You can learn from the experience, go to your next company if you lose your job and say, hey, I was actually part of this efficiency project. I'll do it for you. So it's not so much that AI will take everyone's job. It's more that a person who has some AI skills will win out against somebody who does not have AI skills. And in 3 years' time, you'll find out that the impact is extremely significant. The completely AI agnostic people, they will find it difficult to get jobs anywhere. And it's really a choice you have to make, right? It's a tough message. And my most recent AI culture town hall was successful. This is what I highlighted. And people appreciate, hey, glad you're being candid with us. And it's again, here's what I'll tell you. I want everybody in the company to increase their market value. It's like many, many years ago, everything was brick and mortar stores. Then e-commerce came around. Those companies that refused to embrace e-commerce, we don't even know where they are anymore. But it's not that everyone lost their jobs. The people who used to work in stores are now Uber Eats delivery people or Instacart delivery people. So the work still has to be done. The format will change. So I think that said, there is some truth to coding, for instance, right? About 2 months ago, just to test out Copilot and GitHub, I said to Copilot, can you help me set up a website to sell t-shirts? And it said, here's what you do. I said, no, you set it up for me. So write the code. So then it said, would you like HTML or Java? I said, HTML would be nice with some Java applets. Maybe in 7 minutes, it produced a very nice, sleek, graphic infused code. Then it said, how many t-shirts, how many SKUs, what pricing, those things. I answered those. It wrote the code. I said, okay, you wrote me the code. How does it actually become a website? I said, oh, go to GitHub, which is now part of the Microsoft ecosystem, open a free account, and with 2, 3 clicks, from beginning to end in 17 minutes, I had a t-shirt selling website on. Ultimately, I took it down because I didn't have any t-shirts to sell, although I got a couple of orders, oddly enough. So I think that was in a way terrifying because, wow, to do this, you would have had maybe 3 months or so, a couple of programmers setting up your website and hosting it, all these other things. So if that's the kind of work you're doing, a web designer, a web poster, you're out of luck. The other day, an Uber driver, a young man who's an electronics engineer doing Uber work on the evenings, he told me that I'm thinking of going to school and getting a graphics design degree. What do you think? I said, don't even go there. I said, why? I said, because GenAI can do the graphic work for you, Nano Banana and other tools in no time. Now, what you might want to do, I told him, was learn how the graphic aspects of GenAI work, and then you can become a tester for those tools or something like that.
No, absolutely. And I think that mindset's so important, right? Because you can either lean in or resist. But if you resist, like you said, you get run over. I think that's so powerful. And this has been such a wonderful conversation too, going through some of your perspective on just the whole AI journey. Are there any key thoughts that you'd really like to share, especially with the audience, with regards to either your leadership challenges over the years or some of the other things that you think might be coming in terms of the innovation?
So, in terms of leadership, I think I've had the privilege of being trained by some of the best leaders in Glaxo and elsewhere. And I can't thank them enough. I never wanted to be a leader. I wanted to be a tech geek and do programming. And in fact, my very first boss many, many years ago in a company that became part of Glaxo, he told me, hey, I think you're Ram, you'll make a great leader. I said, I thought leadership meant spending time in the HR writing people up. I refused. And he got tired of me refusing. So he said, can you run this project for me for a while? Sure, I'll take care of it. So I ran this project. The next thing you know, 6 months passed by. I managed 17 different people. And he said, hey, great job. That's leadership. That's what it is. So I think when you're ready to be in a leadership role, it'll happen for you. No need to force it. And at the end of the day, people ask me, right, what makes a good leader? Somebody who's articulate or handsome or smart or whatever it may be. And there's only one aspect you need for someone to be considered a leader. You can only be a leader if people follow you. If no one's following you, you're not a leader, no matter what your title is. And so I said, what you may want to do is really young people who say, I want to make more money or whatever the case may be, and I want promotion, and he or she's got something better, the competitiveness, all these things come in. What I tell people is, you can't control what someone else does. You can only control what you can do. Every single day, give it 200%. Do the best you can. In some environments, you may not be rewarded for it. Some environments, there are somebody who will envy you and try to pull you down. Others will push you. All those things you can't control. You can only control what you can do. Can you do a good job every day? Be your best. Nobody can stop you from doing that. So if you keep doing that, you'll grow steadily and slowly, and set long term goals. A lot of people tend to. I remember when I started out, I came to the US 36 years ago. right after I graduated from a school called the Indian Institute of Technology. That's where I'm from. And so my goal, like and I grew up very poor, practically homeless in India. So my goal, like any new immigrant coming in working hard, was I want to become a millionaire. Okay, so I said I want $1 million. So I worked hard and everything else. But God's grace, that happened when I was maybe in my early 30s. Then I said, okay, now what do I do? What do I do? I said, let me set the next goal and so on. So what I learned was most young people set goals that are very small and try to achieve them too quickly. Have a long-term plan, because you graduate, say, when you're 22, you work till, say, you're 65 or so, or like me, you might want to work till you're 200. Set a long-term goal with 10-year milestones, and here's what you want to accomplish. Certainly, the financial aspect is important, but the one uh, painful lesson I learned, by God's grace, I was able to achieve most of my career milestones. One painful lesson I learned was that I am not invincible like most people. So I found that as I was moving up my career ladder, delivering big $1 billion projects and getting some accolades, I started to become a bit of an accolade junkie. Yes, yes, I want to do more, do more. And one day I look back, and all of a sudden, I went from a strapping young man deadlifting 220 pounds, boxing in the weekends, to an older looking person now whose back creaks when you stand up. Never sacrifice your health. Never, never, never. No job is ever worth it. Set long term goals, but if your career path is pulling your health back, you're not in the right direction. It's not going to end well. And that's something that was very painful for me that I learned. And so then I changed my lifestyle. And so now, of course, although I'm an older person, I'm able to have a good balance. So in terms of leadership, really, you lead your own life, be your own leader, CEO of your own. And when it comes to things like technology and so on, approach everything with an assumption of positive intent. When I listen to hype from tech companies, they're not being bad people. That's just how they work. That's how the tech industry works. With Elon Musk going into
Yeah.
the White House and saying, I'll save you $10 trillion in savings with this Doge program and so on, we end up saving $150 billion, which is very impressive.
Yeah.
But people are annoyed because this guy hyped up so much, and it so happened that people at the White House didn't know how tech works. I could see exactly what was happening, but as approach everyone with an assumption of positive intent. Assume they want to do something good for you. 10% out of 100, maybe they'll stab you in the back, but most of the time, most people are good people, and it makes them more comfortable. So set long-term goals, focus on your health. You will absolutely achieve what you want to achieve. Be positive and embrace new technologies, learn. If somebody comes to you and says they're the ultimate expert in GenAI, there's no such thing, because it's a very new technology. I just saw this posting on LinkedIn today that showed a yellow bird, and it said, you own your wings, fly as high as you want. Nobody owns the sky. So I thought that was fantastic.
I love
Uh,
that.
And so I certainly hope that I in many ways envy the younger generation that they have this powerful tool at their disposal. That, when I was going to school, I had to use logarithm tables to calculate things. What a waste. And that now you can do it easily. In fact, about 8 years ago, if anybody noticed this Bing software, that Bing tool that Microsoft provides on iPhones, my teenage children asked me to help them with the homework. It was a long day. I was tired, quadratic equations. So I just looked at this thing called a math feature on the Bing tool. I scribbled an equation on paper, pointed my iPhone camera to it. It interpreted my hand scribbled quadratic equation, solved it in 13 seconds. I didn't know then that was the beginning of OpenAI's AI creation for Microsoft. Why they didn't move faster, I don't know, but I was like, wow, this is incredible. Somebody pointed out that today's iPhone, even the lowest version, has more computing power than all the computers that sent man to the moon the first time. So we have so much power in our hands now, you can do pretty much anything you want. So it's a great time to be a young person. And there are people saying, oh, I don't want to go to have a Stanford undergrads calling me, saying, maybe I'll never get a job and so on. It's not that you won't get a job. You won't get the job you were expecting to get as a programmer. You'll get something else.
Exactly. Exactly. I have to tell you, this has been such a delightful conversation. Really appreciate your insights that you've shared. And I think the audience is going to really love this episode as well. Any final things that you'd like to say before we sign off?
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. Hopefully people will find what I've had to say helpful. If anybody wants to reach me, they're welcome to reach me on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ram. I really appreciate it. And again, this has just been a wonderful conversation. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, John. Have a great day.